Hi, welcome to a review by P-Show. Lately I've been reading a lot of either standalone books or series that only have one book in them so far, so I couldn't really do a proper series review. So now that I have time, I've decided to kind of lump a few together. So I've decided to do kind of like a YA series one and an adult series one. So to begin with, let's start with the adult series. So I'm going to discuss four different series today, and they're all in the paranormal kind of urban fantasy genre. Okay, so all these reviews are spoiler free. I'll try to keep them spoiler free. And also, I have to admit, these four series aren't great. So, none of them I found brilliant. So, you might want to be prepared for that. Okay, so the first book I'm going to talk about is in the In Affix series, and the first book is called In Affix, and it's by Linda Grimes. So this is about kind of a family of adapters, and basically they can turn into other people, make their whole appearance change, like, you know, kind of like a Mystique from X-Men type of thing. But they do have their own kind of their own appearance as well. They can go back to themselves anytime they want. They can change anything, like become men, women, young, old, change their voices. And our main character is, no, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, Ciel, Ciel. I'm just going to say Ciel. She is the main character, and she has a job. It's kind of a strange job. If people don't want to do something themselves, they'll ask her to do it. Like, someone hires her at the beginning to make her boyfriend kind of propose to her. Just so weird. So I don't really get her job, but she ends up being dragged into this thing because the person she's trying to get to propose for her client ends up being kidnapped, and yeah, this whole big kind of drama begins then. So I was really excited because I've been looking for this like family dynamic that I read in the Shifter series by Rachel Vincent, and I haven't found anything like it, like that really good kind of, you know, family dynamic between characters, and I thought I found it in this. So I loved the potential I saw at the beginning, and I really enjoyed the first like 20-25% of the book. And then I kept reading, and then we get to know the main character Ciel, and we get to know the author's writing, and it just all goes downhill from there, unfortunately. So Ciel, she is just a promiscuous, whiny, stupid child of a girl. When someone says stay here because they don't want you to get killed, and because you've absolutely no useful skills in the situation, you don't ignore them, run off with no clue, and get kidnapped multiple times. She just doesn't listen, and you can't keep going back to that thing where, oh, you're being sexist, you know, girls can do, you know, stuff too. It's not that. It's just that she's just useless. She's no skills needed. So the Ciel, she just aggravated me. And then when it came to the men, the writing, it was just very shallow and lacked substance. And I felt like the love triangle was just thrown in for the sake of it. Ciel actually kisses her kidnapper and enjoys it. Like, who does that? She kisses guys like it's nothing, and she, you know, offers her skills as an adapter very lightly, which just doesn't make you like her. Ciel, she doesn't have fear in any situation, so there's no sense of danger to the book. I felt like the author made it a little too lighthearted. I like a bit of danger and kind of darkness to a book, and there's just none of this. Like, she was getting threatened and kidnapped here and there, and there was just nothing to her. She just treated it like, oh, this big adventure. I did prefer the guy she picked in the end, but the ending was so strange. Like, I won't even explain it yet. It's just weird. I probably will read the next book in the series just to see what happens. But I will also probably complain about the crappy writing the whole time. So this book is a mixed bag. I'm not sure whether to recommend it. Like, it has great potential, and it's a different story, like, you know, family of adapters. You don't get much on the history of adapters, like how they came to be and all that, but just be prepared. The main character Ciel and the writing isn't great. So I let it up to you whether you want to read it. But that's that. Okay, book number 2 I'm going to discuss. It's called Blade Song by J.C. Daniels. and it's the first book in a series called the Colbana Files. So the second book is called Nightblade, and it's out in the 4th of March 2013. So again, when I heard about this book, I was very excited because the story, it reminded me of the first book in the Mercy Thompson series, which I loved. It was great. But the more I started reading, it more reminded me of the Kate Daniels series. So the plot is this kind of she's kind of like an investigator, private investigator called Kit, and then this shifter comes to her and hires her to find this missing shifter teenager, and she has kind of like a soft spot for kids, so she ends up agreeing, and the both of them kind of investigate this and get into trouble and tension along the way. So yeah, the more I read it, it kind of reminded me of the Kate Daniels series, but now I feel like the Kit and Damon couple in it, they're more like a poor imitation of the Kate Curran relationship in the Kate Daniels series. Yes, they fight and say they're badass and have this sexual tension, but I don't think Kit is as badass as Kate is. And Kit, she has issues, like Kate had issues, but they're mentioned so often that it just makes her more whiny and weak than anything. She passes out and gets injured a lot, and at the same time, Damon, the male character, he isn't as likeable as Curran, because most of the time he acts like an asshole just for the sake of it. There doesn't seem to be good enough reason for the way he acts, and for his annoying behaviour. And Kit and Damon, they're both very confrontational, but it's not in an endearing way, it's more in a immature and tiring way. So I couldn't really, love them as a couple. They're just kind of irritating characters at times. The author, I don't think, develops story arcs very well. We find out things about characters later in the book that aren't really hinted at earlier, and a good author would make those moments more of an aha moment, like, oh, you clicked, like when that was first hinted earlier on. So yes, I was disappointed by this book. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, and people are probably wondering why after all those negatives, but they reminded me of the Kate Curran relationship, and they're my favourite couple ever, so anything that reminds me of them, is going to be interesting to me. So I did find them interesting, and I'll probably check out the next book just to see what happens, and I will definitely judge whether I'll read more based on the next book. But don't expect a great piece of urban fantasy. It's more paranormal romance, so just be aware of that. Okay, the next book I'm going to talk about is called Nightshifted, and it's the first book in the Edie Spence series by Cassie Alexander. So Edie Spence, she's a nurse who works in this special part of the hospital that deals with all supernatural creatures, and she ends up meeting a vampire, and things start to happen, and she starts to investigate and get into trouble, blah blah blah. The positives is that I do think it's a kind of interesting premise, a nurse working around all these supernatural creatures, but there's a lot of negatives. It was very dull, there was no direction in the story, I didn't know what the main plot was, and there was no clear love interest till the very, very end. There was just like a random sex scenes thrown in there, and the protagonist was so forgettable, and it was too long, and I rarely say that, but it was too long, and overall I just didn't enjoy it, and I wouldn't recommend it. Right, the third book I'm talking about today, or series, is the first book in a Jessica McClain series by Amanda Carlson, and the book is called Full Blooded. So this had so much potential. When I first heard about the story, again, it reminded me of the Rachel Vincent series, the Shifter series, with that great family dynamic that I've been looking for. And also I love that kind of only girl in a male world storyline, and I had that too, so I was like, oh, this is brilliant, like the best of both worlds. I even skipped it to the top of my to read list. I had about 20 other books on the list, and I skipped this to the top because I wanted to read it straight away. So the story is about Jessica McClain, and there's a little prequel that I read first, and she is the only female werewolf born, and it's never happened before, and all the other male werewolves see her as like this abomination that needs to be killed, because there's this like prophecies that said a female werewolf would be the end of all kind of werewolves. She would be their downfall. So they all hate her, and she's been kind of bullied and attacked and everything, like, growing up. And the only people she really has is her father and her twin brother, and she has one or two friends. So I found that story really interesting. And at the beginning of the actual novel, then, you know, it's a few years later, and she's living by herself, and she has to fake her name and all, so other supernaturals won't find out about her. As well, she can't actually turn into a werewolf. She was born from a werewolf, but she can't turn into a werewolf. Then at the beginning of the novel, she finally does turn into a werewolf at the age of about 26. So then all this other stuff starts happening. Okay, so that sounds really interesting, and I loved that whole story and the family and everything. But it's the writing that lets this book down. I feel like it has all the right words, you know, all the dialogue, the characters say all the right things, but it's like a robot wrote it, or like robots are saying the lines. I felt no connection to the characters whatsoever. I didn't feel any bond between the characters, like the father and daughter. He said all the right things, kind of, but I just didn't feel a bond between them, which is really strange. There was like no feeling in it. It's a real pity, because it could have been great. The protagonist as well was quite irritating. There was kind of stupid subplots, overly long scenes. The scenes went on for ages. There was just like random sex, which I don't think people ever really like. We prefer, you know, it to mean something, or to be between characters where there's, you know, some potential relationship. A very poorly written love kind of mate storyline. I hate all those soulmate things. Oh, and I hated the horrible wolf culture brought into it. So all that added to my negative opinion. And then past the halfway point, I got so bored with this book, I just started skimming it to see what would happen at the end. And it was a complete cliffhanger, which I will not be reading about in the next book. So yeah, unfortunately I won't be reading the next book in the series. Okay, so there are the 4 books. They're not great, I admit. So, that's, you know, a few of the adult series I've been reading lately. They were quite disappointing. But at the moment I'm reading the Nadia Stratford series by Kelly Armstrong, well, the first book in it that I got from the library, and it's actually quite good. So there are good adult novel series out there, but just the ones I've been reading lately aren't great. If you have any good adult series to recommend, please let me know. And if you have any opinions on those books, if you love them or hate them, let me know too. So thank you very much for watching.